Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're happy to have Gary Gelnette with us from Grace Church in Rockland. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
A pleasure being here, John. Thank you.
Where did you grow up and where were you raised, and high school and family and those kinds of things, please?
Well, I was born and raised for the first part of my life in Pennsylvania, northwest Pennsylvania, a little town called Brookfield. Very rural setting, country people, and good people, godly people. My parents moved to northwest Idaho whenever I was 12, and then grew up and went to high school, and then went on after that into school and that kind of thing from Post Falls, Idaho.
Were you raised then in a God-fearing home and a religious home?
I would say yes. They were Wesleyan Methodists, and godly people would go to church every Sunday, but that was pretty much where religion stayed, was on Sunday, and it was a good home, stable home, but we didn't read the Bible every day, we didn't pray every day, that kind of thing. And then in my later teen years is whenever I made a personal decision to serve Christ.
How did that come about?
A friend. I was in high school. One of my good friends was a Christian, went to a local church in the community there. I spent the night with him one night, and he began to talk to me about the things of the Lord. Began to talk to me out of the book of Revelation, actually, and scared me. Then began to talk to me about my need for Christ. And I'd heard the message, growing up, but just never had really had it personally brought to a point of, I need to do that. And out of that, I did make that commitment to serve the Lord, and it's been going ever since.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have one brother.
And is he a churchgoer?
Right now, he's not. He served the Lord for a while and went to church for a while. Was in the police force, went through the academy, went through a lot of years of being an officer. And I'm not sure what all happened there, but I know he went through some experiences that I think caused him to struggle greatly. But we're praying for him. His wife has come in, and she's serving the Lord, but my brother is he's on the way.
That story would probably be true in every family.
Yes.
Somebody can find their way. Others have things that happen that, as my grandfather would say, put us on the gravel side of the road.
Yeah.
Without going completely off. Now, when did you decide you wanted to pastor and minister and do this aggressively in your life?
Well, I began to sense what I would call a calling upon my life. In my last year of high school, I was going to church in Spokane, Washington, and the church was growing. It was a vibrant church. I was part of a youth group then, and they would have evangelists and missionaries come through. And one time, a missionary from Brazil came in, and during his week of messages, his week of meetings, back then they had, elongated meetings that would go on for multiple days and multiple nights. And during that week of meetings with this missionary, I really began to sense that's something that I felt I just wanted to do. And by the time it was all over, I felt that, that's what I have to do. And from there, went into Bible college and began to not just train, but really pursue how to make that happen in my life. And God just began to order steps. I began to speak in youth groups, hold little meetings out myself, and took my first church when I was 23 years old in Portland, Oregon. And I think the average board member age was in their mid-50s, and I was just the kid coming in. But they had a lot of grace and mercy and helped me out. It was great days.
Grace and mercy are extremely important in this world, are they not?
Oh, it's what the kingdom operates on. It's the oil that runs the wheels in the kingdom of God, in my opinion. In that, if we have a message of just judgment, people, they can't connect with that. But whenever there's a message that, there is a judgment, but God has made a way to avoid that, and it's through His great love, through what we call grace, that begins to get people connected with a message of hope, and that God is for them and not against them. And that's really my life's message, actually, in a nutshell.
There are a lot of people, it appears, in our society who have lost hope. How can we overcome that in your mind?
It's a big challenge these days.
It is.
There's so much negativity within, especially our Western culture, I'm sure all around in all the cultures, but we have the 24-hour news cycle. It never stops.
And it usually repeats bad news.
Yeah, and it's seemingly, 95% bad news and maybe a little bit human interest or positive things. But, in people being exposed to that day in and day out, year in and year out, over the decades, many people, as we encounter them in their life, it's through hopeless situations, family crises, personal crises, that kind of thing. But the gospel never changes. When you interject that in, it has a power within itself in that message that Jesus made a way where there seemed to be no way, and that He brings to us an eternal love and a promise that if we'll take one step towards Him, He'll step towards us. And I believe that's where hope begins. It's not going to begin with where the economy is going up or the economy is going down, or this one's in the White House or that one's in the White House. There's no hope within the things that the world tries to hang hope upon. It's only in the eternal values that the Scriptures declare, and then our willingness to just be ambassadors for the Lord and pass that message along, that there is a God and He truly does love you and He truly does care. I think that needs to start within our youngest generation. We need to get that in our children from the earliest time possible, and then find opportunities to just present that message all along the encounters we have with people in life.
I once talked when I was a very young adult to a very elderly man in his 90s who had been a religious leader all of his life. And as we talked about that issue of touching the young and the youth, he said to me, if you can instill in children this great understanding and hope and God and Jesus and peace and compassion and all these other things, that no matter what happens to them when they're teenagers and they're young adults, they will always come back to the roots and the basics. And in the course of that conversation, I said to him, "How do you know this?" And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Jesus told me."
Yeah.
And I thought that was very comforting and very pleasing. Now, how about the church that you're overseeing and ministering to now? Tell us about that.
Well, it's somewhat of a unique place. It's what is called a campus church. That is, it's under the covering of a large church. It's called Grace Church in Houston, Texas. Pastor Steve Riggle is the senior pastor of that church. And he has 3 other smaller campuses or smaller churches. The church here in Rockland, several years ago, it's been here for a long time, probably 30 plus years. A few years back, they were in Citrus Heights, and the leadership decided to relocate, took the equities of all those years of ministry and properties and whatever, and relocated, bought the property in Rockland. But in the transition, it was a vibrant congregation, but during that transition and that move over, coming from a neighborhood church to more of a city and possibly even trying to be a regional type church, the transition was difficult. The Grace in Houston under Steve Riggle came in about 2 years ago to help out, just bring some stability, make that transition in a more practical way. And I was asked about 8 months ago to come and help with that revitalizing of the church here. It's interesting. A few months ago, I was reading a magazine. It was a religious magazine, a religious publication, and on the front cover, it was talking about the concept of larger churches sponsoring smaller churches. And as I began to read that, I realized that is exactly what has happened here. We're a larger congregation that has means and techniques, and they have depth in ministry, can come in and help some of the smaller churches, make that transition. And it's not about becoming a big church, but it's about becoming as effective as you can be, regardless of size in your community. So we call it the Mother Church in Houston. It's a wonderful body of believers, about 10,000 plus people. And they have been such a blessing to this smaller campus here. I do the week-to-week ministry here, but I'm part of a leadership team that is really trying to map out the future and the course and the direction for the local body here in Grace Rockland.
Where did you come from?
I actually came from a little town in Roseburg, Oregon. We had gone several years ago from this church. We were part of this body and helped with the building program and all of the things when they were remodeling this facility. And they sent us out to a small community in southwestern Oregon. We planted a church, and the church just took off. Our first Sunday, there was like 70-some people, and it just grew from there. It was a wonderful experience for us. But after several years there, they asked if we would come back here and help in the ministry in this church that sent us out. After some time of prayer and consideration, we felt, we need to do that. And it's been a joy. It's been like a homecoming. There's been challenges, of course, but it's good to be back home. We love the church and we love the area.
And how's the revitalization going?
Slow, but steady. Anytime you have a change of leadership, people have to adjust.
Absolutely.
And we've done everything we can to make that as smooth as possible, and it has been smooth. We're just now starting to see some new addition, new growth, people coming in. I wanted to take 6 months and just, be here, find out where the body was at, what the real needs of the church are and were. And we've been doing that. So we've been transitioning leadership, talking to those kind of issues. Okay, this is where we are. How can we go from here to where we feel the Lord wants us to be? And that's one of my specialties. I love doing leadership development, that kind of thing. So it's been a good time. The process now would just be starting to, get the word out to the community. So we've got some ideas about doing mailers and, some advertising and that type of thing.
What do you perceive to be your greatest need?
The greatest need is people that would be willing to commit to a local congregation and not just become involved, but commit there to become part of that group, part of that family. I've transitioned in my own concepts of church to where it's not just about getting as many people as you can in a building. This started a number of years ago, but really it's gone from that to when I was a younger man, that was the emphasis. Let's get as many people as we can and that kind of thing. And there's scriptural basis for that. But lately I've been focusing much more on how do we build this as a family and a body. And there's so much in the scriptures that talk about that. And I think sometime in our quest for numbers, we've kind of let that be a secondary issue. I'm making that more of a primary issue. So that's a lot about that is just relationship building, getting to know people. And of course, you can't get to know everybody on a personal friend level, but you can make enough contact with people's lives where you know where they need prayer, what their concerns are, how that they can best fit within the body, because I believe everybody has something to give and something to add to the local congregation.
Absolutely. And sometimes you have to leave the 99 and go to the one. And
absolutely.
That's the way it goes. Do you have a favorite book in the Bible that you enjoy? We hear people talk about they love the book of John or the thrill and the excitement of the book of Revelations. Do you have one that you like?
Yes, I do. It'd be the book of Romans. Just so much of Romans, there's the theological concepts that are there, the doctrinal issues that he dealt with, but so much of Romans is Paul dealing with that local church that was experiencing growing pains. And I think in it, my life verse, and I think I was 17 years old, I was in a service, and they were asking people to choose a verse that they felt the Lord was laying on their heart. And it was from Romans 8, and it said, where the Apostle Paul said, I can consider not the suffering of this present time to be worthy to be compared to the glory that will be revealed in us. And through the ups and downs of life, that's been an anchor for me to go back and say, you know what? This present circumstance and situation, number one, it's temporary. We have an eternal purpose to our lives. And even if there's suffering there and difficulty and issues that are I don't have the answers for at the moment, I know that as I follow Christ, that there is an eternal reward and that there's an eternal destiny, and also a great joy that comes from serving Jesus. There's so much within the world would try to tell us that it's what we accomplish now, and that's valid. But life is more than money and how big of house and how big of car. Life is really about the inner peace that comes from knowing that God's in charge of my life. And as long as I seek Him and serve Him, He's gonna see me through to the end.
That's the hope I have in America, is that God is in charge, not the Supreme Court or the Congress or whatever, and through it all it will be all right. My wife and I were in Rome several years ago, and we live on a street called Trajan, and Trajan's a Roman emperor, in the old days.
Yes.
And I struck up a conversation out in one of the ruins with a man about Trajan, just because that happened to be the street I lived on in the greater Sacramento area. And we got talking about Paul and the Roman Church and the difficulties of being a Christian versus what they called being a Roman. Anyway, we had a nice conversation. We talked about a lot of things. A few days later, we were on the island of Malta, and we went to St. Paul's Cathedral.
Yeah.
And a bomb in World War II got dropped and went right through the roof of that and didn't explode. And it damaged the marble and the graves and things that were in the floor. So they moved the bomb just outside, didn't know, how to undo it.
Yeah.
Repaired the church and all those other things. And long after the war, somebody came by and said, you better deactivate that bomb. You don't want to just go off one day. They said, well, okay, but leave it sitting there because we want it as a reminder of the miracle that we got bombed during the war but weren't exploded on. So in the church that day was a deacon, and I brought up the conversation of Trajan and the Romans and the Christian church and Paul. And he talked to me like he'd just visited with Paul the day before and all of the things that unfolded there. And it was one of the highlights of our trip, was just talking to him about what Paul was doing in the name of Christ, and particularly with that instance with the Romans. That was a wonderful thing. Appreciate that insight. Now, you keep saying we. I'm going to presume a wife and children along the way here somewhere.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little about them?
Yeah, my wife Susan. We've been married for 11 years, have 3 children, and just the love of my life. We love the ministry, the calling, the purposes of God upon our life, and given ourselves to put ministry, not just church ministry, but ministry in that our life, our base solely and 100% on serving Christ, and then serving Him in His call that He's put upon us. That's our reason for being here in Rockland. We do ministry together. She works in the office, of course, but she loves people and prays for people. And I believe that when God calls it, He calls you as a team. He calls you as a family. Our children, our youngest is in Chico State, and we have our daughter that just graduated from Chico State last year, and then we have an older son who's in Vegas, who's a cinematographer, and they love the Lord, and God has been so good to us. But as we minister in the church, people, I believe, they don't, where I think, John, is that people are looking for a place where they don't see it as a professional clergy or a professional ministry, but where they see it where a husband and wife, or they're looking for a place for stability for family. New people that come in to the church here, so many of them have children, and whenever we get to know them and talk to them a little bit, their concern is for their children. A lot of them are in public schools, some are in private schools, but it doesn't seem to matter. They're really looking to find a place of stability, because that, as we were talking earlier, there's so much almost chaos within our society that families, husbands and wives with their kids, they're greatly concerned. They want stability there. And really, it only comes through serving Christ, of course. But that point in the community of stability, I believe, can be the local church. And so Susan and I have given our life to serving the local church and love the call of God and love the purpose of the Lord in that.
Just a couple of days ago in our home was a young mother who, growing up, was a friend with our youngest daughter. And she wasn't interested in God or the church. She wasn't a bad girl or anything. Just didn't have time for that. Well, she had her daughter with her. She has several kids, and this little girl was 3. And she said, "Where are you from?" And sort of, mulling it over where we were going before we talked, she said, "I'm from heaven. Did you come from heaven?"
That is a wonderful answer.
It was just classic. And I said to myself, from now on, if anybody ever asks me where I'm from, I'm going to say I'm from heaven, out of the mouth of a babe.
Yes.
That was a wonderful thing. Now, when you're not doing church work, do you have a hobby or
Well,
hobbies?
we ride motorcycles. It's one of the hobbies or things that we do. My wife and I ride together, and with a few folks in the church, and there's some Christian motorcycle clubs in town, so we'll ride with them, and then we just love the outdoors, hiking, and don't do much camping anymore, but fishing and that kind of thing. And
When you were talking about Spokane in your growing up years, Bishop William Wiegand, who used to be the bishop of the diocese, who's retired now, grew up in the Spokane area and loved fish.
yeah,
And I grew up in a little mountain community on the rivers and streams, and we've talked fishing 100 times. And I think in his dreams he'd go back to boyhood for a minute and just fish in the Spokane area somewhere and have the time of his life. What's the future of your church, and where will you be in another 5 or 10 years?
well, I hope to be here with the church that is thriving and making an impact in the community. I believe that there's never been a greater time to be in the ministry or part of a church, a local church, than right now, John. I think the greatest churches to ever be built are still yet to be built.
That's well said.
And I'm not looking to build, I don't have a numerical number, boy, I want to have 1,000 people or whatever. What I do have is I want to take as many with us to heaven as we possibly can. And I want to activate people to be involved in that process. If people just go to church on Sunday morning or whenever they go, it can become a little laborious after a while. But when people get plugged into helping other people, loving people, being in a vibrant place of activity in serving Christ, there's a joy that comes with that. And that's what my primary goal is to bring people into the joy of serving the Lord.
Do you have weekday programs that families and that can be involved in?
Yeah, of course. We have our Wednesday nights, and then Thursday morning they have a women's meeting, and we have youth groups that do stuff all the time. And there's that practical walking out of the life of the church, and then of course we have our celebration on the weekends, and it feels like being part of a family, and that's what I love.
Do you usually go to bed at night feeling like you've had a pretty good day? And expectations are a funny thing because being perfect's not reasonable, I don't think, but being sufficient is on any given day. And you sleep well at night and say we're doing well and moving forward?
Well, I kind of go back to where it says this is the day the Lord has made. I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. Every day has its challenges, but every day has its rewards as well. And Jesus promised that he would be with us. He'd never leave us. He walked through the ups and the downs of life. And I'm starting to get a little bit older now, so I'm looking at life a little differently. It's not about just what I've accomplished during the day, but it's about the peace of God that remains upon my life and bringing that to other people's lives. I love being in friendships and relationships and having contact with people, and that's how I find my joy and my accomplishment at the end of the day. Who did I make somebody's day a better day because I was there?
Is being a good father and husband and brother and friend and those kinds of things in the congregant's view as important as just being a member of the church and worshiping Christ?
Oh, it has to be the primary goal. It doesn't matter what's on the outside if the inside's messed up. And Jesus said,
that's a good way to say that.
it's not what's on the outside, but it's what's coming out of you that determines whether it's a sweet well or a bitter well, whether there's life or whether there's confusion there. And you know, our goal here, I guess, John, would be to activate people into the purpose of the Lord that He has for their life. And if they can do that, they're going to be where God wants them to be. They're going to have joy upon their life. They're not going to be perfect. Nobody is. But Jesus said He would get us through to the end, and we would overcome.
I have a younger brother who took his own life some years ago, and that's a long way removed from where I live my life. But I've been rehearsing a lot of old journal entries of my parents and old photographs and a lot of things, not out of remorse or regret, but just to kind of recover where we were as kids and, you know, those kinds of things. And he really got to a point where he just couldn't even see it out on the horizon.
Yeah.
And I feel badly about that because it didn't have to be that way, but it just unfolded that way with the way he lived and the pursuits he's made. And I'm always pleased to hear that people will go to church.
Amen.
Amen. Now, if you could fix something in the world that you could just wave a magic wand and it would be repaired or replaced or redone, what would that be?
Well, I believe the final call that Jesus left before He ascended to heaven was He said, take this gospel into every nation and make disciples. I think with the modern technology we have, that can actually happen in the day that we live in.
I agree.
But if I could change one thing, is that a simple, life-giving presentation of the gospel be taken to every social group, every little backwash community, every place on this globe. And I know not everybody's going to receive it, but that everyone would have a chance to receive it, to make a decision. I spent a number of years in the mission field in Arctic Canada, ministering to small communities and small village people, and to see the joy of people coming to Christ is the greatest joy that I would have.
Thank you, and thanks for being with us. We appreciate visiting with you.
My pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you.